This is where we get into the nitty-gritty of honoring your health. I need to give credit where credit is due. The presentation slides that I am using is part of the Health at Every Size curriculum. And the focus of this particular presentation is developing a healthy relationship with food and exercise. This curriculum was developed by a team of individuals representing 3 different organizations: the Society for Nutrition, Education, and Behavior, the National Association for the Advancement of Fat Acceptance, and the Association for Size Diversity and Health. Health at Every Size supports people in adopting health habits for the sake of health and well-being, rather than a focus of weight control or weight loss. Health at Every Size, also referred to as HAES, encourages eating in a flexible manner that values pleasure and honors the internal cues of hunger. So you're honoring your hunger, the satiety, you're honoring your fullness and appetite. It also encourages finding the joy in moving your body and becoming more physically vital, as well as accepting and respecting the natural diversity of all body sizes and shapes. For our purposes today, we will be focusing on the first and second concepts: eating in a flexible manner that values pleasure and honors your hunger, satisfaction, and appetite, as well as finding joy in moving naturally, just because it's incredible to be able to move. We often adopt many food and exercise rules based on what we see in the media. So, in this presentation, I'll be talking about the negative side effects of thinking black and white about food and exercise. I'll also talk to you about the different cues for eating and how to tune into hunger and fullness to guide eating timing as well as amounts. Now, keep in mind, you're not going to be measuring or weighing anything. You're going to be trusting your body. We'll also talk about how to be ready when hunger strikes, with some basic tips for planning snacks and meals. We'll spend some time talking about cravings and how to remain mindful while you're eating. We'll also talk a little bit about eating for emotional reasons and finish talking about finding fun ways to be active. Often we do a lot of black and white thinking when it comes to eating. We tend to label foods as good or bad and then experience guilty feelings when eating foods on the quote unquote bad list, and pride when we eat foods on that good list. This back and forth can be emotionally exhausting. Raise your hand if you've ever had thoughts like these when eating. I know I have, and I'm guessing that most of us have had these at some point. Feel free to take some time to think about what happens when we label foods as good or bad. Most of the time, what we experience is that we become obsessed about food, and the eating experience itself becomes less enjoyable. If we mix black and white together, it makes gray. If we stopped this internal battle and listened to our entire body, not just our brains, maybe our thoughts would resemble something more like these gray thoughts. I kind of want something crunchy and salty. I think I'll have some carrots and some chips. Pizza sounds good. I like giving my body the nutrients it needs. I think I'll have a salad with my pizza. Honey Nut Cheerios are too sweet. Regular Cheerios are too boring. I'll mix them together. I feel like being active, but I don't feel like running today. I think I'll go for a walk. So look at this yo-yo. Most of us know how to use a yo-yo. Now, we all know that yo-yos go up and they go down. You've probably even heard the term yo-yo dieting, where body weight goes up and down. What's interesting about yo-yos is that they are basically impossible to get them to stop halfway. This is very similar to yo-yo dieting because yo-yo dieting results in these extreme ups and downs in thought patterns and weight, making it impossible to find middle ground. However, if we let the yo-yo drop all the way down, it could easily start swinging from side to side, and then we have a pendulum. When we label foods as good and restrict those foods, the yo-yo gets pulled all the way to one side. We stay here as long as we can, restricting until one day we give up and we throw in the towel. What happens to the yo-yo if we let go? It swings to the other side, representing our internal food rebel. We say, oh, forget it. I just really want some birthday cake. My diet is over. Then we eat some birthday cake. And since we're quote unquote off our diet, we might as well have the 6 other foods we've been missing. Now what happens? Guilt sets in. I feel fat. I shouldn't have eaten that. I really blew it. I'll start my diet again tomorrow. Then restriction, then binge, then restriction, then binge. And the swinging continues. But if we don't pull as far over to the food police side and begin restricting, perhaps we won't swing so far over to the food rebel side and we'll find this nice, happy middle ground. If you stop pulling on the yo-yo, it will eventually stop swinging. It won't stop swinging immediately. It takes time to lose momentum. And in the same way, it may take years to rid ourselves of the dieting mentality. Developing a healthy relationship with food, movement, and our body takes time, but there is freedom on the other side. If there are drawbacks to labeling food as good or bad, how are we supposed to figure out what and when to eat? Next, we're going to talk about internal versus external cues to eating. All children are born to eat in response to cues. When an infant is starting to move and fuss, starting to chew on those fingers, those are hunger cues. By the time they get to crying, they are famished. They stop crying when they get food, and then they turn away when they're full. Into toddlerhood and childhood, the same thing happens. The child gets cranky when hungry and stops eating in the middle of a meal because the child loses interest or becomes full. We are born to be intuitive about eating, relying on our hunger and fullness cues, cravings, flavors, textures, colors, and smells. What happens? How do we lose those cues? Parents may start pressuring a child to eat more of this or less of that. Eat your broccoli and then you can have a cookie. One way or another, we start learning about nutrition and the good versus bad foods. Then we start learning nutrition. Sometimes we're just encouraged to eat a variety, and other times we might be taught how to count calories, keep track of portions, or fat grams using food labels and dietary guidelines as a guide. These are external cues to eating. As adults, we are taught that we can't trust our internal cues to guide when and how much to eat, and instead need to be told how much to eat and when to eat using external cues. These external cues may help us learn nutrition, but can be very limiting. Let's say we decide one day that we want to eat 800 calories each day. We start reading our food labels and counting up our calories. What if one day you are more active or stressed? Maybe on that day you need more calories. Why stop at 1800 if on that day your body needs more? And what if on another day you get a bad head cold and you're on the couch all day? Who's to say that 1800 calories is the right amount on that day? It may be more than your body needs that day. So actually aiming for a certain calorie level doesn't make much sense. The idea of attending to internal cues is that our body knows exactly how much it needs each day. The key is listening. Let's take a closer look at our internal cues and how paying attention to hunger and fullness can guide the timing of our meals and snacks. Paying attention to hunger and fullness cues, or intuitive eating, is about relearning the cues we naturally had as children. This hunger fullness scale is one strategy some find useful in starting to pay attention to hunger going into a meal or snack, satisfaction during a meal or snack, and fullness at the end. Using a scale like this one pictured, 1 is ravenously hungry or starving, and 10 is uncomfortably full or stuffed. Every body has different cues for hunger and fullness, and it's a matter of figuring out your own cues. What happens when you start eating a meal when you're starving? How full are you when you are finished? Well, when you're starving, you're usually overstuffed because you overfeed yourself. What happens when you start eating a meal when you're just gently hungry? And how full are you when you are finished? You're usually comfortably full. While this philosophy sounds simple, it can actually be quite challenging at first. So, what keeps people from eating when hungry? Think about yourself. What keeps you from eating when you're hungry? For a lot of people, we're afraid to gain any more weight, and we've been taught that eating is what makes us fat. Can also be poor planning, or you've had an extremely busy day and you failed to stop to get something to eat. How about not even realizing that you're hungry? On the other side is fullness. What keeps people from stopping when they're comfortably full? Well, sometimes it's the taste. The food is so good that you just can't stop. How about fear that you won't get to have that food again? What if the clean plate club rules carried over from your childhood? Maybe you're afraid of wasting food. How about forgetting to check in with the fullness sensor? A delayed satiety response cue. How about emotional reasons for eating? Busy schedules make it hard to tune into our hunger and fullness, but when we do, we can honor and respect our body's natural cues. Respecting and honoring our hunger cues involves eating regularly throughout the day, just when we start to feel hungry, but before we become starving. Respecting and honoring our fullness cues involves checking in with our fullness and satisfaction during meals and finding a comfortable stopping place. When we don't respond to these cues, it's important to stay curious and non judgmental. In other words, there's no need to turn this into a dieting rule. Start by being more aware and allow for flexibility. You may have good intentions to eat when you're hungry, but sometimes hunger might sneak up on you when you're not prepared. Next, we're going to talk about the importance of planning for eating. As much as possible, it's helpful to keep your cupboards and fridge from becoming bare. So keep them full. How many times have you been out and about and all of a sudden you're hungry and completely unprepared? A little planning up front can save time and money and also make it easier to respond to hunger cues. A few questions you can ask yourself on the way out the door is where will I be the next time I get hungry? What food will be available? And do I need to bring something along? It all starts at the grocery store. Figure out how you like to do your grocery shopping. Some people like to go every day, others less often. Whatever your preferred style, go in with a little plan. Figure out some meals you like to make and make shopping lists with what you'll need for those meals. Don't overthink the nutrition part of this. Just think quick, easy meals with a few food groups included. Purchase foods that satisfy a variety of cravings for different tastes, textures, and flavors. It's important to pay attention to cravings and satisfy cravings throughout the week. Cravings can be trusted because if you grow up with exposure to many different tastes, textures, and flavors, chances are good that your body will crave variety. Sometimes we go to the grocery store and avoid buying certain foods that we're craving because we believe they are bad for our health. But those cravings usually don't just dissolve on their own, they usually intensify. It may feel like you only crave foods that are high in fat, salt, sugar, or calories, but the truth is that you probably crave a lot of different foods. If you were raised being fed a variety of foods, your taste buds have probably adapted to a lot of different tastes, textures, and flavors, and therefore likely craves a variety. When we give ourselves permission to eat all foods, those foods often lose their power over us. This might sound too good to be true. It's hard to believe that cravings can be trusted. Perhaps you're thinking, if I satisfied my cravings, I'd eat all sorts of foods my body doesn't need. Yes, it actually might at first. But then what might happen is that when you tell yourself you can eat those foods anytime, you realize you don't crave them as often as you thought. If you've ever been on a road trip, you know exactly what happens. You eat out a lot. And if you're like me, it's fun at first to maybe stop at different restaurants and try out different foods that you don't normally eat. And then over time, it sort of gets old. Do you ever start craving the foods from home that you're used to? I usually start craving salads when I'm on road trips. Or let's say you're a big fan of brownies, and today you say, Yippee! She told me I can eat brownies. I'm going to go home right now and make some and have as many as I want. You may eat a lot of them at first, but then, maybe after a while, you might get tired of brownies. These two examples may help you realize that your cravings can be trusted, and there may even be some sort of strange psychological factors at play here. When we have full permission to eat the foods we enjoy, the foods may even lose their power over us. Part of giving ourselves full permission to eat the foods we enjoy is to, at the same time, attend to cravings. Ask yourself, why do I want that food right now? Sometimes we only choose to eat a food because it's offered to us and we want to be polite. We may not even feel like eating it. Or sometimes we only eat it because it's free, or other times because we paid for it. But if we take the time to really check in with our cravings and we keep our cupboards well stocked, then we can make a choice to eat those foods when we crave them. Doesn't food taste so good when we're actually craving it and when we slow down to enjoy it? We eat for all sorts of reasons. Consider two girls, Melanie and Maddie. Melanie and Maddie have the exact same affinity for brownies. They love brownies. They each make a pan of brownies to enjoy. When they come out of the oven and cool, Melanie enjoys 2 brownies. Maddie ends up eating 6. If they both love brownies the same, what are some reasons that Melanie ate 2 and Maddie ate 6? Well, there could be some emotional stuff coming in. Maddie felt badly about eating the brownies, so she figured she'd go for it tonight and start the diet tomorrow. Melanie's craving was satisfied with only 2 brownies, while Maddie needed 6. Melanie has better self-control than Maddie. Maddie was watching TV while eating the brownies and didn't notice how many she was eating. See, a wide variety of things could have led to that difference. Restriction, or even thoughts of restriction, makes it hard to tune in to cravings. For example, if I told you today that you could no longer eat ice cream starting tomorrow, what would you eat tonight? Well, of course you would eat ice cream, even though you may not have been craving ice cream originally. Kids are interesting creatures. If left alone, at some meals they will only eat the meat. At some meals, they will only eat the starch, and at other meals, they may only eat the vegetable. Over time, if not pressured and given a variety of foods, they tend to eat a balanced diet. When we ask ourselves what we feel like eating, there may be some days we feel like bacon. Other days we feel like broccoli. Have you ever sprinkled some chopped bacon on top of broccoli? Delicious. And another example of thinking gray instead of black and white. When we are stuck in the head game of guilt, it's impossible to notice cravings. I want you to take a moment to consider how you typically respond to your cravings. What foods do you feel out of control around? So think about, what is it that you cannot keep in the house? Because if you did, you'd eat the entire box. What would happen if you gave yourself complete permission to enjoy as much as you wanted of that food? What would happen if you also stayed mindful during the entire eating experience? So you paid attention to how it felt as it entered your mouth and landed on your tongue, what it tasted like, what the texture was like. If you don't stay mindful or present as you're satisfying your cravings, you will miss the entire eating experience and still crave the food after you've eaten it. Therefore, be mindful, be present as you're eating. Now, let's talk more about what it means to be mindful, or what it means to be an intuitive eater. Mindful eating can be represented by this my plate image. Staying mindful during the eating experience means awareness. So you're removing distractions while eating. Observation. You're checking in with your body during the eating experience. Savoring. As you're eating, notice the texture, aroma, and flavor. Remain in the moment while eating, fully present, sitting, and enjoying. Be non-judgmental. If negative feelings or emotions arise while you're eating, it's important to remain compassionate towards yourself. Notice feelings of guilt or shoulds in a curious, non-judgmental way. Remaining mindful while eating also includes maintaining an attitude of gratitude for the food, considering where it came from, and a general appreciation for having enough. Or perhaps this type of mental checklist might be useful for remaining mindful before and during the meal. Before eating, you can check in with your body. What is my energy level? What is my stomach saying? What am I craving? What am I feeling? During the meal or snack, you can continue to check in. Is this food satisfying my craving? Am I still enjoying the food? What is my stomach saying? Emotions. Does the food still taste good? Am I feeling satisfied by the food? It can be challenging to remain mindful during the entire meal, especially if this is a new way of thinking for you. Practicing mindfulness takes time. Be patient. And even if you start by only being mindful for a minute or two, it's a start. There are many terms for this style of eating. Focused, mindful, attuned, and intuitive eating are just a few terms to describe slowing down and paying attention. Paying attention to your body goes beyond hunger, fullness, and cravings. Notice how certain foods and eating styles influence other aspects of wellness, such as your daily energy levels, bowel regularity, sleeping patterns, fatigue, upset stomach, or heartburn. When we notice how certain foods influence the way we feel, we tend to desire a balanced way of eating. At times, we may choose a food not because we are craving it, but because we know it will help us feel better. This is all part of intuitive eating. Sometimes we're able to find foods that we crave and give us something our body wants. For example, let's say you're craving something sweet to have with your coffee, and you are also wanting something that can help with constipation. Then maybe a bran muffin with honey will do the trick. You may find that certain foods give you a spike of energy, but then leave you feeling lethargic or hungry an hour later. Mixing carbohydrates with protein and fiber may give you a mixture of food that gives you more sustainable energy. In addition to staying mindful while eating and mindful of how your body feels when you eat certain foods, You can also stay mindful of your emotions and emotional responses to eating. It's important not to label emotional eating as bad, because whenever we label something as bad, we want to do it more. What are different types of emotions that might lead people to eat when they aren't physiologically hungry? For some of us, the experience of eating makes us feel better. It might reduce anxiety, make us happy when we're sad, or simply fill a void of loneliness or boredom. Often, the emotions are very complicated. You may start eating because you're bored, but then continue eating because the food is helping you cope with a certain emotion. Food is just one of many coping tools that are used to deal with emotions. It must really work on some level, or else people wouldn't do it. If we say to ourselves, oh, I really shouldn't be emotionally eating right now, it's bad for my body, then we simply add another emotion to the mix, guilt, and maybe even shame. So telling yourself that emotional eating is bad doesn't really help the situation. Instead of trying to get rid of emotional eating as a coping tool, try to build an arsenal of coping tools so that you have many ways to soothe yourself when you're feeling anxious, lonely, depressed, annoyed, frustrated, etc. Some like to vent to a friend, others like to journal, meditate, go for a walk, take a nap, or watch a funny movie. Allow food to be one of those tools, and whenever you choose eating as a way of coping, try to remain mindful during the eating experience. Notice how the food is making you feel. Now, we typically eat differently when we are eating to satisfy a craving versus eating to fill an emotional void. What have you noticed in yourself? Or what do these images suggest? When we are eating to satisfy a craving, we slow down and appreciate the food. When we eat due to emotions or when we feel guilty about eating, we tend to scarf the food down quickly to make those feelings go away. Again, this is simply about noticing in a non judgmental, compassionate manner with curiosity and mindfulness. If this all sounds too good to be true, it's important to review the research that supports this style of eating. Different researchers have found that those who give themselves full permission to eat the foods they enjoy are less likely to overeat, including binge eating behaviors. They also experience less guilt with eating. Also, individuals who rely more on hunger and fullness cues or internal cues instead of external cues to guide eating have a more positive self esteem and have a better body image. In addition, Hawks and colleagues found that intuitive eaters actually have better cholesterol, higher levels of good HDL cholesterol, and lower triglycerides, lower levels of fat in the blood. While intuitive eating isn't about trying to manage weight, it is interesting to note that intuitive eaters tend to have lower body mass index, lower body weight for their height, compared to unintuitive eaters, and a lower overall cardiovascular risk as well. Now that we've discussed the first principle of the HAES paradigm, let's move on to the second, which is to find joy in activity. Another term for participating in enjoyable physical activities is intuitive exercise. Often, people start an exercise routine with the primary purpose of weight loss. People often put nutrition and exercise together. I'm going to start eating better, so I think I'll go to the gym as well. What happens when weight loss is the primary motivation for exercise? The focus is on counting calories expended, which often leads us to use only the exercise machines that will keep track of that for us. There can also be a lot of black and white thinking with exercise. I just ate those brownies, so I better go for a run. Some people may even avoid working out in public places for fear of looking different from others around them. And the most unfortunate side effect of exercising for weight loss is the fact that as soon as the weight stops dropping, the motivation for exercise is gone. Exercise does so many wonderful things for your body, both physically and emotionally. It's not just a way to eat more. Mindful eating expert Dr. Michelle May says exercise is for health and vitality, not for earning the right to eat. Research actually backs up the fact that weight loss isn't the best motivator for exercise. There are two primary forms of motivation: intrinsic and extrinsic. Intrinsic motivation is motivation that comes from internal rewards such as enhanced mood, decreased stress, enjoyment of the activity, and improved sleep. These rewards are often experienced during or immediately after the activity. Extrinsic motivation is motivation that comes from external rewards. External rewards are not typically immediate, such as weight loss, improved muscle tone, or even setting up a reward system of money or gifts to motivate. While extrinsic rewards may help motivate someone to get started on an exercise routine, research shows that those who exercise regularly are able to shift focus from extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation. In other words, extrinsic motivation may get us started, but unless we focus on intrinsic motivation for exercise, we may easily wane from being regularly active. This may be true for eating too. If we're eating in a way that gives us energy and makes us feel good and it's enjoyable, we're more likely to stick to the dietary change than if we're just eating for an external reward. Here is a list of various intrinsic forms of motivation for exercise. These intrinsic motivators have actually been proven benefits of exercise. Which ones do you find to be true for you? The next time you're debating whether to go for a walk, it may help to think of a few immediate benefits you may experience if you decide to go. For example, you may think, if I go for a walk with a friend, I'll get to spend time with him. Plus, I might do better on my exam later that afternoon. And I know I always feel better about myself when I exercise. Or, I'm so stressed right now, I know exercise will help me to calm down. Just like with nutrition, people often get hung up on the details. Black and white thinking types of statements people make are, oh, if I don't go for an hour, then what's the point? Or if I don't break a sweat, then it really doesn't even count. This is why instead of exercise, I call it movement. Don't worry about doing the right activities for the right amount of time. Just find activities that are fun and mix it up. Just like with food, variety is key. Variety keeps it fun and interesting. And just like with food, listen to what your body wants. Your body may crave to be active if you listen to it. Plus, there may be days that moving your body might not be best, like when you're sick or injured. It's important to listen and remember, everything counts as movement, so have fun with it. Here are just a few ideas. Now, this is not a complete list. I'm sure that you could add some things to this list all on your own. The main message with activity is to move your body in a way that feels good. Notice how it feels, intrinsic motivation. And once again, just like with eating, mindfulness is key. To sum up this mindfulness or intuitive approach to eating, key messages are to tune into your hunger and fullness to guide when you eat and how much you eat. Try to stay mindful and present while you eat, turning off distractions like TVs, tablets, and phones. Pay attention to your cravings and satisfy them. Stay mindful during the eating experience. Think ahead a little and be ready with regular meals and snacks when hunger strikes. When choosing ways to be active, consider what you truly enjoy and focus on how the exercise makes you feel. If you would like more information about the concepts discussed in this presentation, please visit the websites of these organizations who have sponsored this presentation. You might also choose to check out these books and websites. I would like to acknowledge the creators and the development team of this curriculum and studies for you to reference.